I'm just going to come out and say it. Throughout most of human history, men were mostly a bunch of blue-pilled cucks. Men were expected to sacrifice, to die in wars, to work long hours in jobs they hated to support their families. Men were essentially force-fed shit sandwiches their whole lives, and most of them just proudly ate it without asking questions. This, however, all changed when Gen Z came of age. I'm a millennial who's currently rechasing the athletic dreams of my 20s. I recently joined a track team where I quickly realized everyone on my team was a solid 10 to 15 years younger than me. I started hanging out with the guys more and more, and I noticed something was very different about them than guys of my generation. These guys were tall, athletic, good-looking. They clearly would have plenty of options on the dating market if they wanted, but none of them were even remotely interested. They never talked about girls or even looked at them. They were focused on their own goals and passions, which in this case was mostly sports. This was a very stark contrast from when I was their age. If you've ever seen an American high school movie where the guys are constantly horny and obsessively talking about girls 24/7, trust me. When I say, as someone who grew up in that era, this was not actually too far off from reality. You literally had to talk about girls 99% of the time. Otherwise, people would think you were gay or weird or something. Millennials were certainly like this, and though I wasn't alive in previous eras, from everything I heard, it certainly sounds like guys back then were no better. If anything, they were even worse. This constant obsession with chasing girls led to so many disastrous consequences for the men of my generation. Guys got absolutely eviscerated in divorce courts, got used, abused, and cheated on. To make matters worse, society didn't give a rip about these men either. In fact, if anything, they were told that it was their fault. At first, I would feel sorry for these guys, but over time, I realized it was partially their own fault too. Guys of past generations were complete prisoners to the allure of beautiful women, and as a result, willingly threw their own self-respect and dignity out the window in pursuit of women. This lack of self-respect started with women, but quickly permeated into other aspects of their lives, such as work, business, family, and community, where they would completely sacrifice themselves for nothing in return. Make no mistake, there is nothing inherently wrong with sacrifice in and of itself. In fact, it was considered a rather noble thing back in the day. But the thing is, there has to be reciprocity. Sacrifice is only noble when the other side appreciates and rewards your sacrifice. Sacrificing yourself for a woman that doesn't care about you, a society that doesn't appreciate you, a world which devalues you just doesn't make sense. And Gen Z are the first generation of men that are finally starting to ask what's even the point. But it's such an obvious question that men should have started asking long ago, but I guess just weren't smart enough to until now. Before we continue, I want to make one thing clear. This isn't meant to be a red-pilled, anti-woman, misogynistic video. Women definitely have their own share of challenges and difficulties they face in the rapidly changing, confusing modern world as well. And I believe it's important to always try to understand the other side, even if you don't agree with them. Many people complain about how modern dating sucks, but fail to realize that if traditional dating was so good, there wouldn't have been such a massive push for change in the first place. Women not having the right to work, being married off young, forced to be a lifelong housewife for a guy who often abused, mistreated, and cheated on her, was definitely horrible as well. Feminism definitely had its purpose. We can certainly debate on whether it's become excessive at this point, whether the positives outweigh the negatives, but we can, or at least should, all be able to agree that to some level it was needed, at least in the past. I graduated high school in the late 2000s, and as I came of age, I witnessed firsthand the massive cultural shift of modern feminism. Every day I saw more and more memes, rhetoric, and propaganda pushing feminist content. I was very young back then and had no idea how the world worked. But even then, I could intuitively sense that it was already having a massive impact on dating, and that it was only going to get worse. Women were being told to stay single in their 20s and not depend on a man, to prioritize their career and education before relationships, to find and discover themselves. Hey, that's all fair enough. I wasn't mature enough to be in a relationship when I was 20 either. But because modern women and feminists decided to start this seismic cultural shift, men should have found ways to make counter-adaptations to this as well. But men, for the most part, just remained blue-pilled simps, shamelessly chasing and sacrificing everything for a girl who'd rather prioritize her career, her education, her freedom, and everything else over. That's all changing with Gen Z men, however, who have made a ton of beautiful adaptations to the modern dating game. And by the way, By adaptations, I don't mean endlessly consuming rage bait, women-hating content online. Though some guys definitely still do that, and that's also unhealthy. Never let yourself fall in that trap. Instead of hating, I recommend just adapting, which a lot of you Zoomers are already doing very well. For example, if women are being told to prioritize their careers and education over men and relationships, you should also spend your 20s finding and honing in on your passions in life, whether that's sports, video games, or starting your own business. If women are telling you that they don't feel safe when you approach them, well, just stop approaching them. Work on yourself and improve until they start approaching you. Situationships are also an example of a beautiful adaptation I've seen from Gen Z guys. Women complain about situationships on TikTok all the time, but what they don't realize is, as this comment puts it, men didn't create situationships, we simply adapted to it. Since modern women don't want to prioritize relationships and family anymore, what's the logical adaptation to that? Well, let's just not commit and have fun and enjoy it while it lasts. These are the types of things I recommend young men do in their 20s now. As a guy who wasted and saw a lot of other men waste their potential chasing girls when they were your age. A lot of young guys today have already realized this, whether through sharing experiences over the internet or through their own intuition. And to that I say, as a man in my 30s, big respect to all you young kings out there. This is why Gen Z is the chadliest generation ever.